Please excuse me if I get emotional in this speech. Before I begin, I would like to share that in grade 4, I did my book report with my mother on a novel called Home Free, written by Kathy Kaser. This book inspired me to remember the past and pave my own path towards the future. Never could I have imagined that I would have the honor to not only meet the talented Kathy Kaser, but also stand here before you today presenting our joint project. Thank you, Kathy, for everything. In addition, it is a privilege to stand alongside my role models and mentors who have become my friends throughout this journey. Max, Bill, and Hetty, you have supported me through thick and thin. You have even supported me at times when I should have been supporting you. You are the greatest role models, and it is through your guidance that I pave my path today with each step hoping to honor those that were lost and those that through all the suffering remained. I arrived at the courtroom in Lüneburg, Germany in the early morning of April 21st alongside the Holocaust survivors who would be testifying during the court's proceedings against the SS officer known as Oscar Groening. I looked around the room in awe. There were people everywhere. Media representatives hounded the survivors, pestering for pictures and interviews. Police personnel covered every corner of the room, watching. A row of prosecuting lawyers sat to the left, shuffling their papers and reviewing their notes. The witnesses, including the survivors, were escorted to seats behind them. At the front of the room sat a row of judges looking proud and stern, and to the right was Oscar Groening and his defense lawyers. I stared at him from afar and then began to approach. He was an old man at 94 years. He looked frail and helpless. A terrifying thought crossed my mind. Evil is not performed by evil men, but by regular people who act on the evil potential inside all people. I wanted to speak to him, but what would I say? Everything that needed to be said would be said in court, seared on the record of history for future generations to learn from. After a bit of schmoozing, I convinced the tech guy to let me use the translation device and sat down in my assigned seat. As I waited, I began to ponder the whirlwind that led me to this spot. There were two main factors that transformed my dream into reality: passion and persistence. My passion was sparked years earlier on the March of the Living. This experience changed my life. It shaped my passions, molded my dreams. As I walked the blood-stained streets of Poland, I felt a connection to those that suffered, the ones that survived, who pulled through the suffering with every last breath of hope that they possessed, and those that did not make it to Liberation Day. I developed an understanding of humanity, the power that we possess, the resilience that we can harness, in contrast to the evil that can be sparked within us. I saw the ashes, the crematoria, the piles of hair, suitcases, and shoes. I touched the scratches on the walls of the gas chambers, as you saw. I smelt the fear and heard the screams that once permeated through the camps. I needed to know more. I needed to do more. How did this happen, and how does it affect us today? What can we do now? One survivor that accompanied us on that trip was Hetty Bohm. Hetty made an imprint on me on that trip that has never disappeared, although years have passed. I admire her strength, her courage, her faith in humanity and in me. I shared a moment with Hetty upon exiting the gas chambers in Auschwitz, which you saw on the screen. I had broken down in sobs, unbelieving of the scene that I was witnessing, and how after personally experiencing such atrocities, she could return all these years later. She pulled me in, and with her forehead to mine, she said softly, "I do this for you." These survivors relive the horrors of their childhoods each year when they return to the land of their imprisonment, the place that robbed them of their families and their youth simply for us, so that we can learn, so that we can understand, so that we can share, and so that we can ensure that such atrocities never again transpire, because we are the future and we must learn from the past. After this experience, I adopted Holocaust education as my calling and was imbued with a responsibility to create a better tomorrow in the shadow of yesterday. Attending the Nazi trial would provide me with a deeper understanding of the events that took place, as well as the tools and legitimacy to share these important messages with my generation, so that side by side we could create a better future. The next factor was persistence. After I first found out about the trial from Hetty, I must have called Thomas Walter's cell phone 100 times. I would not give up. Each time he posed a problem, I would search for a solution. Come hell or high water, I was going to that trial. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I was not willing to miss. After pestering everyone involved just enough that my plans would come to fruition, while not enough that they would start hating me, and securing funds from the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center in exchange for up-to-date blogs about the trial, I was going to witness firsthand the last of the Nazi trials. Each day, I woke up at an unlivable hour, in my opinion, and got to eat breakfast with the survivors. We bussed to the courtroom together, which was really only a 10-minute walk from our hotel. For lunch, we would debrief at a nearby church, and undoubtedly, every day after court, Max would ask me to grab a beer with him. Spending this emotional time with the survivors and some of their children was difficult. I could see the horrible memories playing in the creases on their foreheads and tears in their eyes. I had seen each of them share their stories previously on the March of the Living, but this was different. This was harder. They were testifying for those who could not. Hetty's mother, Bill's 8-year-old sister, and Max's father. Testifying in front of a judge, a German judge, testifying to the cruelties that were faced when they had never dreamed that they would have the opportunity. Could you ever imagine in a million years when you were in Auschwitz that someday the Nazi and the prisoner would face each other on an equal playing field in a setting of justice rather than in Auschwitz? That you could say whatever you want to him and he couldn't beat you or kill you, but he must answer you in front of a court. That you could demand justice, I asked Hetty Bone. No, never, she replied. In front of my eyes, the survivors were claiming freedom from their own nightmares and freedom from the shackles of Jewish helplessness. On the first day of the trial, Groening himself spoke. I was terrified to hear what he had to say. He sounded detached and distant. He explained that he voluntarily joined the SS in 1940 after being a Hitler Youth for multiple years. He insisted that he only joined because they were known as being an elite and efficient subdivision of the army, and he wanted to be a part of that. He did not know the role of an SS officer nor the reality of the camps. That's what he said. He stressed over and over again that Hitler was good for the country. He took the multitudes of unemployed individuals in German society at the time off the streets. If he claimed that the enemies of the German people, including the Jews, must be disposed of for the good of the German people, then this is exactly what must happen, he thought. He believed in Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism. Everybody believed it. He never objected to the disposal of Jews, even in the camps. The thing that morally bothered him, he explained, was the extraordinarily harsh manner in which this goal was accomplished. Yet he was following orders. He was trained to be obedient. However, he was a cog in the wheel, and with his help, it carried out evil. The peak of the emotional roller coaster for me that day in court, as Kathy said, was at the end of Groening's statement. He concluded by declaring, I confess to moral guilt. I am morally complicit in the murder of Jews. I say this in repentance and humility. I ask for forgiveness. At this point, tears streamed down my face. I was overcome with despair. Groening spoke of Auschwitz as if it were a 9-to-5 job, like working in a bank or at a mall. This was his job, but these were our lives. Hetty, once again, just as she did 3 years before, pulled me in. With her forehead to mine, she instructed, don't cry, be happy, this is a good thing. I was puzzled. How could this be a good thing? Traumatized survivors facing the image of their perpetrators 70 years later. Hetty understood that through this trial, listening to this heinous man speak and being able to not only answer, but to demand our own answers, was claiming freedom. Freedom from the nightmares and freedom from the eternal Jewish history of helplessness. We were not helpless anymore. This trial was going to make a dent in history, warning criminals worldwide about the consequences of their actions and Holocaust deniers of the legal foolishness of their claims. On April 23rd, which happened to be Israel's Independence Day, the prosecuting lawyer addressed Groening. Behind me sit survivors and their children. Could you ever imagine at the time in Auschwitz that a Jew would get out alive and have children? No, Groening replied after a long pause. I could not imagine a Jewish person getting out alive. I was filled with emotion, as if an empty cup was suddenly overflowing. filled with pride and praise that Jewish people are alive and thrive to this very day. And in this courtroom, as we represent our people, we bear strength and courage, and we celebrate our freedom, the right to speak in the name of justice. Each survivor's testimony brought tears to my eyes as I listened to them shed bricks of burden from their shoulders, one by one, and transfer the responsibility to all of us, the younger generation, to speak, to teach, and to tolerate. Even more intimate than the testimonies were the moments I shared with these survivors outside of the courtroom. I learned their hopes and their fears. I learned to listen and to support. I also brought a little welcome youth to the group. They continue to amaze me beyond words. The survivors here today are my heroes. They have shown me what true goodness is, what sheer strength is in the face of outstanding adversity, and what unwavering faith looks like, and I hope to only emulate them in the future. Our group became like a family in Lunenburg, yet this made it even harder to hear their suffering and watch the pain that still taunts them today. Just as Hetty once said, they are testifying for a reason, for us, to make the world a better place for future generations. Although Groening claims to have learned, the world clearly has not. We are spiraling back into the hatred of the Holocaust day by day. Anti-Semitism is on the rise. People do not feel safe expressing their identities, like those in Jewish communities who do not feel comfortable wearing a kippah for fear of the society in which they reside. We must emerge from the dark tunnel into the light, convert evil to justice and crime to education. We must speak the truth of the Holocaust and bring about a better world, one with the elimination of hatred and in its place respect and humanity. The journey of spreading Holocaust education and combating intolerance that began on the March of the Living has not ended with the Groening trial or even the publication of this book. I'm currently in the process of starting a nonprofit which will fulfill these goals in an immersive and engaging manner. However, publishing To Look a Nazi in the Eye, thanks to Second Story Press, has given me the opportunity to share my experiences with the world and pass on the message of humanity to every generation to come. As a great mentor of mine, Erwin Kotler, often says, the Holocaust did not begin in the gas chambers. It began with words. If it was sparked by words, then so too it can be prevented with words. And I cannot imagine words more eloquently put than Kathy's. From this experience, I learned about the power of one, the potential of one person to succeed, to transform, and to destroy. Moreover, I saw the power of many. Humanity coming together can uphold an ideal of justice that transcends generations. Humanity can also sink to the depths of immorality and commit unimaginable acts of evil, whitewashed under the excuse of following orders. I learned about responsibility to stand up against injustice and for each other's struggles as human beings. Responsibility to carry on the legacies of all that existed before, and finally, the responsibility to create a better tomorrow. To conclude, I would like to read an excerpt from the book, which I included in one of my blogs from the trial. In my opinion, the trial wasn't as much about achieving justice for the survivors in the shadow of all the loved ones lost, as much as it was in sending a message to the world. A message to those who breed hatred. Intolerance will not go unchecked. A message to those who commit crimes, no matter how far in the past. There will be consequences. A message to all genocidal victims. You are not alone. But mostly a message to the younger generation. What will you do? In honor of those who suffered during the hell of the Holocaust and those who continue to suffer today, we will accept the torch of history, passed on from our ancestors, burning with built-up resilience, fueled with pain felt, lives lost, and evil bred. With this torch, we, the youth of today, will create a better tomorrow. Thank you so much.